Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense, the longest running cannabis show in the world. We've been on the air since 1996 with over 1,100 shows produced. But we have an incredible archive if you go out and look at YouTube/Cannabis Common Sense. We also stream online on Facebook at Facebook/Restore Hemp. It has a little bit over 600,000 followers. But we have a great show for you tonight. We have a longtime activist from Missoula, Montana. Tony Schwartz will be talking about his situation there. And we have an interesting hemp news segment, some groundbreaking news as usual. And just stay tuned as we bring on our infamous dancing cannabis leaves.
I feel the force.
Welcome back. Aren't they cute? Dancing leaf to leaf. All right, our first story tonight is from Europe. Malta, an island in the Mediterranean, which is the smallest member of the European Union. Their parliament on Tuesday this week, December 14th, approved a bill to legalize marijuana, setting the country up as the first in Europe to enact reform as soon as the measure is formally signed into law, which is expected within days. Under the legislation sponsored, adults 18 and older be allowed to possess up to 7 grams of cannabis and cultivate up to 4 plants for personal use. Up to 50 grams of homegrown marijuana could be stored at home. While there wouldn't be a commercial market per se, non-profit cooperatives would be able to cultivate marijuana and distribute it to members. Possession of more than 7 grams but less than 28 grams by an adult would be punishable by a 50 to 100 euro fine without the threat of jail time or a criminal record. Minors who are found in possession of cannabis would be referred to Commission for Justice for a care plan rather than face arrest. Cannabis clubs would be authorized under the bill, could have as many as 500 members, and would be limited to distributing 7 grams per day to each member, with a maximum of 50 grams per month. They could also distribute up to 20 cannabis seeds per month to each member. The legislation itself says its purpose is aimed at allowing for a balance between individual freedom in the limited and responsible personal use of cannabis and other social requirements. The vote to approve the bill was 36 to 27, and Malta's President George Valet of the Labour Party is expected to sign it into law this weekend. While there was debate among lawmakers about whether to set the THC limit on marijuana products, they ultimately decided against the notion because, quote, "you'll be creating a new market for the black market," said the Government Minister Bonici, who passed the bill. And he said that for equality, research, and innovation, what we need to do is educate people and inform them day after day, end quote. Yeah, I agree with that. Malta's opposition National Party attempted to get Parliament's Petition Committee to hold a hearing after submitting a series of complaints about the legalization proposal, but the panel's chairman rejected that request last week. Malta's the smallest member nation of the European Union and stands to beat out several other countries in the region where legalization could soon be enacted. The leaders of Germany's new coalition government parties announced that late last month that they have a formal agreement to legalize cannabis and promote broader drug policy harm reduction measures when they take power, which they did just this week. In neighboring Luxembourg, the Ministers of Justice and Homeland Security unveiled a legalization proposal in October. It still requires a vote in Parliament, but is expected to pass. For now, the country is focusing on legalization within a home setting. Parliament's expected to vote on the proposal in early 2022, and the ruling parties are friendly to the reform. Meanwhile, in Italy, Italian voters may get a chance this spring to vote on a referendum to legalize personal possession and home cultivation of cannabis, as well as psilocybin mushrooms. Over here in the United States, there are several competing legalization bills moving through Congress. A reform bill cleared the House Judiciary Committee in September, another is being finalized by the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and colleagues. A Republican lawmaker also introduced a legalization bill last month. A draft bill to legalize and regulate marijuana sales in Mexico is being circulated among senators, with top lawmakers saying its intent is to vote very soon. Canada and Uruguay have already legalized recreational adult use cannabis. In new survey data from here in the United States, released last week from the University of Michigan's annual Monitoring the Future survey, shows unprecedented year-over-year decline in young people's use of marijuana and other controlled substances. The authors reported the percentage of students who reported using marijuana in all forms, including smoking and vaping, excuse me, within the past year decreased significantly for 8th, 10th, and 12th grade students. Specifically, the data identified a 38% year-over-year reduction in self-reported marijuana use among 8th graders, a 38% decline among 10th graders, and a 13% decrease among 12th graders. Nora Valco, director of the United States National Institute on Drug Abuse, which funded the study, said, quote, "We've never seen such a dramatic decrease in drug use among teens in just a one-year period. These data are unprecedented and highlight one unexpected potential consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic, which caused seismic shifts in the day-to-day lives of adolescents," end quote. In September, Dr. Volko publicly acknowledged that the enactment of statewide laws regulating the adult use cannabis market has not led to an increase in the percentage of young people using cannabis. The Monitoring the Future findings come just months after the United States National Institutes of Health released similar conclusions. That study also reported dramatic year-over-year decreases in cannabis use by those aged 12 to 17. The latest findings add to the growing body of scientific literature showing marijuana regulation policies can be implemented in a manner that provides access for adults while simultaneously limiting youth access and misuse. The Monitoring the Future findings are consistent with numerous other studies concluding that statewide marijuana legalization policies are not associated with any significant rise in either the use of marijuana by young people or their ability to access it. From Washington, D.C., Representatives Dave Joyce, an Ohio Republican, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a New York Democrat, have introduced legislation to incentivize state and local governments to expunge the criminal records of those who've been previously convicted of marijuana offenses. Their bill, entitled the Harnessing Opportunity by Pursuing Expungement, or HOPE Act, seeks to appropriate $20 million to the United States Attorney General for the purposes of financially assisting state and local governments with the process of reviewing and expunging cannabis convictions. This bipartisan effort represents the growing consensus to reform marijuana policies in a manner that addresses the harms inflicted by prohibition. It provides cash assistance for state and localities that are wisely choosing to remove these stigmatizing records. There's no justification for continuing to prevent tens of millions of Americans from fully participating in their community and workforce simply because they bear the burden of a past marijuana conviction. Legislatures in over a dozen states have enacted laws explicitly facilitating the expungement of low-level cannabis convictions. State officials have vacated an estimated 2.2 million marijuana-related convictions under these laws over the past 2 years. Representative Dave Joyce, an Ohio Republican, said, quote, "Having been both a public defender and a prosecutor, I've seen firsthand how cannabis law violations can foreclose a lifetime of opportunities ranging from employment to education to housing." by helping states establish and improve expungement programs for minor cannabis offenses. The HOPE Act will pave the way for expanded economic opportunities to thrive alongside effective investment of redress the consequences of the war on drugs, end quote. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez added, as we continue to advocate for the decriminalization and legalization of marijuana, this bipartisan bill will provide localities and resources that they need to expunge drug charges that continue to hold back Americans, disproportionately people of color, from employment, housing, and other opportunities. Our next story is from right here in River City. The Portland, Oregon City Council gave the go-ahead to distribute $1.33 million to local cannabis companies impacted over the past 2 years by the pandemic, property crime, and wildfires. Funded by a 3% tax on cannabis sales passed by voters in 2016, the money is meant to help cannabis shops not eligible for federal COVID relief. During the council session, Portland's Cannabis Licensing and Policy Coordinator Christina Corsi reminded the body that small businesses received $114 million in CARES Act funds at the beginning of the pandemic. However, due to cannabis's federal designation as a Schedule I narcotic, most of the essential cannabis businesses felt virtually none of the relief. Compounding these issues were robberies that affected the cash-only businesses especially hard, and the devastating 2020 wildfires. Corsi estimates the Cannabis Emergency Relief Fund will help 75% of Portland's cannabis licenses. Businesses must be located in the city or be based in Oregon but operate in Portland to be eligible for the program. Social equity licenses will be prioritized. Individuals may receive up to $5,000 and businesses may receive up to $25,000, according to the report. Businesses who receive money from the city will be able to spend the funds on personal protection equipment, paying rent or mortgage, insurance, or payroll expenses. The city is leaning on 3 external groups, New Leaf, The Initiative, and the Oregon Cannabis Association, to distribute the funds to speed up the process and cut down on costs. Our last story tonight is from Basel, Switzerland. The adjunctive use of CBD is associated with reduction in patients' use of antipsychotic medicines, according to placebo-controlled trial data published in the journal Frontiers in Psychiatry. An international team of researchers from Canada, Switzerland, and Germany assessed the use of CBD cigarettes versus placebo in a cohort of acutely psychotic patients with schizophrenia or other psychotic disorders. Patients received either CBD or a placebo daily for 28 days in addition to their standard treatments. Investigators reported that both CBD and placebo were associated with similar reductions in psychotic symptoms and depression, but that those participants who consumed CBD cigarettes used fewer antipsychotic medications during treatment. Conversely, those in the placebo group increased their use of prescription medications. The authors concluded, quote, the main group effect in the discontinuance multi-level model were higher subjective well-being and less overall antipsychotic medication use throughout the acute therapy for the CBD group. These results may suggest an antipsychotic medication sparing effect of CBD cigarettes as adjunctive therapy in acutely psychotic patients. However, future studies with more rigorous study designs and larger samples are needed, end quote. They always say that. CBD administration is established to have anxiotic and antipsychotic effects in human subjects, and its use is associated with changes in brain activity that may lower some people's risk of a psychotic episode. Previously published clinical trial data indicates that the daily administration of high doses of CBD, or 1,000 milligrams, reduces psychotic symptoms in patients with schizophrenia in a manner that's superior to prescription antipsychotic agent amisulpride. The full text of this study, Cannabidiol cigarettes as an adjunctive treatment for psychotic disorders, a randomized open label. That's the end of our Hemp News segment tonight. If you are a loved one or looking to help find a doctor to help get a medical marijuana permit, whether it be in Oklahoma, Florida, the Northeast, Oregon, Washington, Hawaii, Alaska, California. We have a physician referral service. Just call our office at 503-235-4606. Again, if you're looking for a doctor, call our physician referral service at 503-235-4606. Okay, I would like to welcome Tony Schwartz in Missoula, Montana. Tony has been a longtime activist there, and he reached out about a month ago before the election talking about why we don't need more taxes on marijuana. And I thought, well, Tony, you should come on the show and we can talk about that. Here you are. Welcome to the show, Tony.
Thank you, Paul, for having me. Yeah, the more taxes is the more crime revenue, because poor income people aren't going to look for a store where it's widely available. They're going to look for a place where they can afford it. And so at the high tax revenue, it's actually pushing poor people to one side of the table. And
yeah, more to the black market illegal sources that aren't taxed.
Yes, sir. And that's not what this program should be about. It should be helping every American citizen through, or Montana citizen, as where I am, enjoy themselves on a substance that's more therapeutic than alcohol or anything that's available on the pharmaceutical industry. And it's like the cards are stacked more and more for them, and then it is actually us. We don't actually have a recreational program yet. Anytime they have something set, the legislature changes it. And
let's talk about that just a moment. So they've had the medical marijuana program there in Montana, I think, since about 2008. Is that right?
Actually 2004, but in 2008 we went back into the legislature and we came up with I-148, which was a productive bill, and it helped a majority of the Montana citizens up until 2011.
I, as you may know, saw patients on a regular basis there in Missoula and opened an office in downtown Missoula for our THCF medical clinics for a couple of years and helped a number of patients. But I found that there was this other fellow who had come into our clinic when we first opened, Jason Christ, and he pretty much wiped out and discredited the program by setting up basically a card mill where he would get doctors to sign forms and line up 1,000 patients at a get-go over a weekend and just hand out these certificates without going through proper medical documentation. And he was also, he courted really bad publicity. He carried around a big long pipe with a long stem, and he'd smoke it wherever he was at, and he caused public scenes. And you want to talk?
He liked to smoke at the Capitol a lot.
Yeah.
And he threatened Verizon to blow him up, and that was the last we heard of him. And then he moved to Arizona, is where I heard he is located now. But he hasn't been up here in our system. There's been other people that have been close, but we haven't had that kind of almost commercialized what he did to our program.
He really got a lot of bad publicity for the program, which I think led to a federal crackdown. A number of the program really boomed in Montana there at first, and dispensaries opened up all across the state until the federal government came in and arrested a lot of people and put a number of them in prison.
There's a number of reasons why the federal raids happened. I've been told that the people in Helena, there was a dispensary that a dude was having an inappropriate relationship with a younger girl, and they caught him with it, and he had guns, and that brought in the federal government. And so that also made it a federal issue, and then they just took that and ran with it. And Jason was kind of the poster child for the come down, but there was a lot of things that should have been done better. One of the main dispensaries in Helena had more mildewy cannabis than it actually had that was anything similar to a medical value. That's where they should have put their focus on.
Yeah.
It was actual having something like they do now. But I think they should have ghost checks where the people come in and they don't let you know, and they check your stuff to see what your quality is, what your percents are, and if you're doing it right, they help you instead of removing your license. Maybe they should after a third time, or a question that you're not, going by what information they're trying to help you with. But I think they're more out to expunge the program and cause more hard times for the people that are living with it, because we're able to be productive, where before this it wasn't like that.
So you have been a medical marijuana patient since when there in Montana?
I've had my cannabis card since 2007.
And you had been through a traumatic brain injury in an accident as a teenager, isn't that correct?
Yes, sir, that is.
You want to tell our audience about that a little bit and how medical marijuana helped you get off pharmaceuticals and improve your life?
Yeah. Well, when I was 15, I was a young teenager. I just moved from a small town called Sealy Lake, and I was a wrestler, and I wrestled the captain, and I had no idea how to box. And so he asked me if I wanted to, and, being confident in myself, I did. Well, I never held a chance. And when I fell back, my head, it collided with the cement bench and it buckled me. And so the top part of my brain went to the right and right up here. And so when I'm under a lot of pressure, I have seizures. Well, that was further induced when the pharmaceutical companies, they caused more harm than they did anything. I was in a coma for a good month and a half, maybe month, and it was more downhill up to that because of what the pharmaceutical industry did to me. I have lumps on my kidneys that I wasn't able to digest because, like cannabis, your body, it shuts down your pancreas, and so it gradually just kills you instead of reviving what cannabis has done for me. Since 2007, I've been able to outcome a lot of the situations that they said I would never be able to do, and be a productive member of my community and father. I've had my kids a majority of their lives. They're a huge response of why I've been able to bounce back. I've been a member of the local YMCA since my youngest was 2, so that's been 10 years this year. And it's been just gradually picking up and trying to find what I missed out on, because the pharmaceutical company had me in a coma where for 10 years I was blank and I wasn't able to thrive or really get through the day-to-day without having issues. So that's been 21 years, and so I've had freedom of that for 13 years, actually going on 14 years. And I was totally misled a majority of my life. I was told that cannabis would have the side effects that the pharmaceutical would have, because, of course, as you know, they demonized it. When I got it, I was totally impressed. I was able to have a normal conversation. I'm able to respond to you and not really drowse out or or be able to even consciously understand what you say.
Yeah, that's what the opiates do, is they just kind of knock you out. And uh, cannabis, though, doesn't do that, and it helps achieve homeostasis or balance in all the body systems. So it's a miracle drug in my book. And
I was on 7 different medications 3 times a day. It wasn't just opioids, it was barbiturates, anti seizures, anti it was just a deadly cocktail. It wasn't just one. It I can't just say it was the opioids that caused the problems. It was all of them.
so you were there when the laws really started to take off for medical marijuana. But recently, the people of Montana have voted to legalize marijuana overall, but they haven't opened up those stores yet. It's been postponed by the legislature several times, and they've tried to curtail it. I know that they were defeated in trying to turn that back. You want to talk a little bit about that?
It seems like any time that they come up with a functional plan, the other side isn't happy with it. But our governor isn't giving them. He's saying it either they come together or it goes as it is on January 1st, I believe. And so I'm excited to see how it pans out. I really hope that we're able to make everybody's happy and we're able to reduce crime. We're able to do like what several other states have done, because we're having a fentanyl problem in Montana right now, and we've had a meth issue, and our initial program really helped deteriorate that and turn Montana around. And so I'm hoping for a similar outcome like that. But with the way that legislature has worked, it's hard to say if it's going to be able to work or not, because they're making it as hard as possible for these caregivers and the ones that are doing everything they can to make those requirements and make them, responsible through every state law or anything that they've been. There's been several people that have went out of business just because they weren't able to stay financially open with whatever the testing was, with rent, and it's going to be an exciting time when it actually does open. I hope everyone is successful and is able to stay open and not just open and then immediately go out of business because they sold everything they got until their next harvest.
What's happened here in Oregon is that there were enough growers to supply more cannabis than the market could take. And so the people who've really benefited are the dispensaries. They've been able to buy cannabis at a very low rate. And where in typical business, they have this retail paradigm called a keystone, where they have 100% markup on something. So say you buy something for $100, you sell it for $200, and that's typical retail profit margin. But in the dispensary business here in Oregon, the typical markup has been 300%. So if they buy, they're getting pounds very, very cheaply, and then they're selling them 300 and sometimes 500 or 700% markup.
Gosh.
Because if the cannabis is so cheap, some outdoor growers, particularly at this time of year when the outdoor crop is still flooding the market, the price drops down. Some growers just get $100 or $200 a pound.
Gosh.
Yeah, but you'll see ounces for sale as low as $28 an ounce. But typical is more in the $100 range. But high grade indoor cannabis draws a premium. Mm-hmm. And so it can sell for up to $300 or a little bit more. But the real beneficiaries have been the dispensary businesses, particularly those that are vertically integrated, where they can grow their own and sell their own. go along that way. But we have pretty strict testing requirements for pesticides and adulterants and things like that, which protect the market generally. Sometimes things slip through.
And that happens. I think testing is highly important. I think it's something that we need to educate people about what they're putting into it and help them come up with a better way if they're not happy with whatever the pesticide or whatever the growth, whatever they're not, help create a way of making it better instead of making more crimes or issues for the people in Montana. We need a new revenue. We need something other than the Department of Corrections thriving off our state, because we have such a beautiful, and we have people that deserve more than what we've been able to get. And so it's going to be, I think it's going to be better than it was prior. So that's where I'm.
It's a definite step forward where adults can't be arrested for cannabis anymore. Under Montana's law, are people allowed to grow their own?
I believe we're able to have 2 plants per adult. And so if you're a married couple of 4, and I'm not sure of what they can be for clones or for the starts. I think everything has to go from seed. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know if they're going to have a division that comes and checks on people, but it seems like they are allowing some home grows.
Yeah, here in Oregon,
depending if you own the home.
Here in Oregon, every household, doesn't matter how many people live in it, can have 4 plants. But under the medical law, every patient can flower 6 plants and have 36 plants or 38 plants that are less than 2 feet tall and 14 plants that are taller than 2 feet. So they can keep their gardens going that way. But there are inspections. If you have more than 2 patients, then you have to go through the metric system if you're a medical grower. And that can be very expensive, and it's fraught with potential fines and inspections. And I particularly have opted to just grow for myself and one other patient, because I really can't afford to get into the metric system. There's a $500 annual fee, and then you open yourself up to 24/7 inspections. And then the reporting requirements are pretty outrageous. You have to say you were my patient and I was going to go take you an ounce. I would first have to make a report that I am going to go take an ounce to you, and I'd have to say the exact route I would follow to take it to you in the report. I'd have to say we're going to go on Highway 90 and turn off at exit 5 and do things like that. But and then when I left, I'd have to report that I'd left. And then when I delivered it, I'd have to report I delivered it. So there are 3 different reporting requirements there under this metric system. And that's what all the commercial businesses have to do. But, they're making money where a lot of us growers for medical patients are not making anything at all. So I really can't afford those extra costs. And if you don't do it right, you're subject to fines and public penalties and things like that.
Yeah.
So
Montana runs pretty close to the same program, except for I don't believe there's any break. I think if you have any clients or any patients whatsoever, you have to contact or have communication with a metric. I don't remember, but they're just checkers that gradually go around and they make sure your stuff's like you were saying, for mildew, for all kinds of it, but they're also checking for THC levels. And I don't know of many that go over 35%, but that's our highest peak. And oh,
Yeah, I'm not sure about 30, I've seen some that have been marked higher than 35%, but it's really all about those numbers when it comes to the dollars. And so you see a lot of people shopping around for the best tests they can possibly get, so they can maximize their sales.
whoa. I I don't know. That's a hard place to have any kind of room to grow if you're a low income person, but you're educated, learning more. And it's awesome to hear how, this plant has so many benefits for everybody that really gets to feel the need of what the opposite of they've been led up to believe, and to hear some actual words that go with the meaning of the feelings that I've been trying to explain. That's pretty experience. And Paul, I remember your store on Orange Street. Actually, I remember we've had conversations about Cash Hyde being one of your clients. And I'm dear friends with his family. He's a huge reason why I had to become a better parent, because of how awesome his dad is and his parents, period. But yeah, he would have been 14 this year, or
I know
13.
initially
I believe
he came to our Spokane clinic. His parents traveled to Spokane to see our office there at first. But explain to our audience, Cash Hyde was a pediatric cannabis patient. You want to explain about his?
He was the youngest cannabis patient in the United States at the time. His parents, Kylie and Mike, they are some of the most impressive people. They stood up and they fought against our state. They fought for our patients, and they gave education where there was so many clueless people. This little boy thrived until they took it away, and it was a sad day, and how our local government treated this amazing family was completely inappropriate. But they're a huge reason why I can't ever stop learning more and more about how much this plant does. It's it's absolutely life changing. Every bit of knowledge, it needs to be more out there to the general public that's clueless. I've met several nurses and doctors that didn't even know that we had federal patients, like Irv Rosenfeld or Robert Randall. And being able to have conversations with Irvin, because he also lived here in Missoula from 2000 to 2004.
He was dating Heidi, who worked in our offices, or her daughter worked in our office there for a while. Heidi Camp.
Heidi Hanford.
And
I talked to her today, actually. That's awesome. But
tell her I said hi. And hi to her daughter as well. She was a good employee, as I recall. I didn't spend a lot of time in Montana in our office there, but she always was a good worker there.
Yeah. Well, we appreciated the time, and they live in Florida now.
Irv Rosenfeld's down there too. Yeah.
I don't think they separated, and they're on I don't know what he's doing. He's probably still doing his book deals, but she's on her own path now, and a new relationship. But it seems like she's doing reasonably well. Other than the pandemic is really rough
Yeah.
down there. That's where Montana was good when we were closed. We had lots of open area, and now everywhere we go, there's so much people, and the cost of living has just spiked.
Right. Yeah. The
But
price of everything's been going up. You know, I was a young adult in the 70s and 80s, and so I remember when inflation was really high back then. It was going up as much as 15% a year. So it hasn't got up that bad again yet, but we'll see what happens. I think that a lot of it has to do with the whole supply chain. You know, the fact that so many cargo containers come here with products and we don't have anything to ship back to them. We're just importing. We're not exporting very much. So we have this huge surplus here domestically of cargo containers. And then the price of cargo container usage has skyrocketed as well. It's gone up like 2,000%. So that's driving the supply chain problems. But, you know, everything kind of went dead when everything closed down in March of 2020. And so it's just a matter of bringing everything back. I'm hopeful that it'll change. So are you involved in the Hemp Fest that happens there in Missoula, or have you been involved with that?
The last actual Hemp Fest in Missoula was done in 2014. I did PR work for Montana Normal for different shows, and I did it for the Slightly Stupid venue out at the Big Sky Amphitheater. I'm not involved with the one out in Lolo. I don't know much about that people. It doesn't seem it just hasn't piqued my interest, and it's out of something I can afford, because with the money put for that one, I could go out to Seattle and, well, hopefully next year, and get more of an experience that I would look for.
The Seattle one is great. I know that. We always had a conflict in dates with the Missoula Hemp Fest, where our Portland Hemp Stock Festival, the city told us the dates we could have certain parks. And so those happened to conflict with the one in Missoula many times. And unfortunately, it wasn't because we wanted that way. It's just the city of Portland made us do that. But let me know, did you know about the Floor family? And we had Chris Lindsay on. Chris Lindsay was on. He's a lawyer there in Montana who was arrested in that whole big crackdown. And
I know Richard Floor. I know Christine. I know. I haven't met his wife, but I'm friends with her on Sherry, I believe is her name. Yeah, I love Kristen. She's an absolute go-getter. She's been getting people left and right. She's the reason I met Eddie Lepp, which was somebody that I looked up to, which also was another thing that was a privilege of being on here, is your time that you spent with Jack Herrera. And I met Jorge Cervantes at the 2010 Cannabis Cup, or maybe it was the 2011. It might have been both of them in San Francisco. I never got to go to Amsterdam,
Francisco,
but yep, I got two of them there that I got to. I met Danny Danko and the whole part, but a lot of them came up. There was a cannabis education deal at the University of Montana, and Dan Sky and all of them came up for it. It was right before the 2011 one, and that was a pretty awesome experience. Montana has a lot of potential.
Explain to our audience what happened to Richard Floor and his wife and his family, and what really motivates Kristen Floor to keep working for patients today. It's just horrible. I think what happened to all those people. Tom, I can't remember his last name,
Tom the
Bear
Bear.
and Chris Lindsay and those guys all got caught up in that.
Tom DeBear was the main activist. He wrote our cannabis bill, and he got pulled in because he joined a company that they thought was thriving and just the way that it was set up. So when the federal government came in, they knew Richard's health issues. They knew the stuff. And so when he complained about it, they blew him off and he actually passed away. And I can't remember which
In
place
Las
he was
Vegas. He was
held,
in
but
Las Vegas, handcuffed to he was being transferred to a federal prison facility, and he was handcuffed to a hospital bed in a jail in Las Vegas when he passed.
all over a plant. This man was one of the nicest human beings. He wanted everybody to be treated right. He wanted love. He wanted people to be healthy. And he wanted what I think everyone would say was a good person was him. You know, there wasn't a selfish bone in this man's body. And that, it's such a terrible story. And so his daughter has went, and she is a warrior on all levels. Kristen Floor has gone from every side of this country, pulling people out of prisons from, well, just recently there was one in Washington, D.C. or Florida, and she's been with Randy, the race car driver, him and her, and they've got a good group that they're pulling it together, and they're really making a difference out there where I would love to see more of what the Powell country, you know, how they've helped people like Chris Martin in Phoenix. There's been several people. Chris Williams, which was also one of the people that got arrested with Tom DeBear, Chris Lindsay, Richard Floor, and his wife. He spent 5 years, and they really made more of his deal a media of a fear tactic instead of actually helping this guy learn from what he did wrong. And had they been able to do that, I think that they would still have one of the most pioneered. Montana cannabis was on it was the face of our state. And so I think
it was
that's
really taking off until the federal government came in and arrested all of those folks. I remember Tom DeBear came into our clinics when we first started holding them there in a conference facility in Missoula. And we worked closely with him because I really admired the way he was organizing things, what I thought was right. It was pretty shocking to see the federal government get him in this this awful raid on our community.
It is a shame what they did to him because he's not a criminal. He's not somebody that's going to fight in a sense, or he's going to cooperate because he's not somebody that is a I don't know, he's not a bad person per se. You know what I mean? He's done everything he could do to make the program succeed and go without any of the problems. I think without what he did, we wouldn't have an idea of what we could do to make it better. And so that guy was a huge face of helping our program more than anything. A lot of people are really hard on
Do you have any
Tom.
idea of what he's up to now?
He's a painter in Pennsylvania. He I think he's retired, just hanging out. He might do some volunteer work or something, but for the most part, it looks like he's just keeping it with his family and enjoying what rest of life
I
he's
know.
got. Not that he's old or anything, but it just seems like he's doing well for what he got out of that. I don't think he's allowed to be in the cannabis industry or anything like that for a certain amount of time either. And that's something he should be in, because that guy, he knows how to rally people. He knows how to get them educated, know their facts before they talk, and work together instead of everybody against each other. Like Montana's really separated since that terrible day. There's a documentary called Code of the West that will give you an update and an idea of how that all came together. It doesn't really give, I think, enough light on Richard Fleur. There should be definitely more on what his circumstances were, because that guy didn't do anybody any harm. Like I said previous, it's a shame how he was
Yeah,
treated.
it is. It's a
Um,
tragedy that is yet to be fully recognized, and it's really inspirational the way his daughter and family have responded to that, I think.
how do you feel about the MORE Act? It went through the House bill,
Well,
or
I think it's
I
good.
saw.
It's passed again through the House, so it's up to the Senate to pick it up. So I think it's a good piece of legislation. You know, last year when it passed,
Yes.
obviously Kentucky's majority leader at the time, Mitch McConnell, didn't want to see anything. But with Schumer in there as the majority leader of the Senate, and a number of Republicans are in favor of it as well. So it has a little bit of bipartisan support. I think it's one of the best hopes in terms of seeing marijuana legal on a federal level this year. And so we're definitely supporting that.
I think we just got to get more of that message out there, and we got to allow people to know who to contact so they can influence how this would make a huge difference for even the people that didn't use it. There's no reason for the punishment or for tax money to be wasted where it could be utilized in mental health, in crime, in housing, for several of the things like Colorado and Oregon have been able to create.
I know you first
Uh,
reached out to me about talking about on the program in opposition to the new taxes that were on the ballot for marijuana there. Those were defeated, and it seems like they were defeated everywhere that they were on the ballot. In terms of, I know in Denver there was an initiative, and the whole state of Colorado there was another one, but they were defeated there in Montana too, right?
um, they tried to raise the medical and that got shut down, but they did raise the recreational 3%, and the program hasn't even opened yet. And so I'm not sure what they've taken away and what they haven't added, but I know it's 23% as of yet. It may be more on the THC levels. There's a lot to come out still. As that unveils, I'll try to keep you updated.
All right, I appreciate that. Is there anything else you'd like to address here in terms of the scene in Montana, or anything else?
And no, I would just like to appreciate the time that you give me. What you do, Paul, is inspirational. The time when I got to meet you in 2015 and what I've seen you and your wife do, it's awesome. Thank you for having me here. Montana is an amazing state. It's got a lot to learn. It's got a lot of development, but it's expensive, so it's not a place I would jump to start a new company or think that it's a place that we could thrive in. It's really actually becoming more unaffordable. Uh,
That's happening everywhere, though.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Um,
Fortunately.
but other than that, thank you, and we'll hopefully be able to do this in the studio sometime. I love a lot of your guests. Pony Boy is a good friend of mine. When I'm in Vegas, he had me come down to his house. Uh, there's several people that you've got on. George, I want to get one of his encyclopedias. I I think that's been a huge part of learning and development. But thank you, and
He's really taught a lot of people about growing, including myself. When I first started doing it myself in the like 1984, his book was I told him it was my Bible, and later I know he put on his marijuana horticulture the Grower's Bible. Wasn't there initially, but he's a good friend and still he lives in Spain now.
yeah,
So
I talk to
our
him frequently.
all right.
A lot of his images were from Eddie Lepp's farm too, on that other, and so it's crazy how small this community really is. And Eddie
Yeah,
Lepp lived in Hamilton for several years before he moved to California.
I
And
didn't know that.
yeah, I got to have several awesome conversations with him before he passed away. It's a That's a big one that we lost last year.
Yeah.
But thank you, Paul. I hope this turns out. This is my first time, and so thank you again for.
It out there on the internet. It'll be on Facebook and on YouTube. It's easy to get to on YouTube. We don't have a very big audience on YouTube, but it's very loyal.
Awesome.
Online, we get most of our viewers on Facebook.
Cool.
But anyway, I want to thank you for coming on. Tony Schwartz in Missoula, Montana, a longtime medical marijuana activist. Thanks for doing it, Tony. And if you're in Portland, look me up. And if I ever get out to Missoula again, I'll try to give you a call.
Yes, sir. And if you do get out here, check out Groove Cannabis. It's downtown. It's affordable. It's awesome. And Red Dog Connoisseur. That's my favorite location where I get mine. So if I get over there, I'll hit you up. What's your strain of choice before we head off?
Oh, I like ones with limonene, things that have a strong lemon flavor.
Mm-hmm.
I like the more sativa dominants because they wake me up. I know most people prefer indicas, but myself, I lost my favorite strain, Lemon Pledge, a couple years ago. But now I'm just buying clones out there and growing mostly indicas.
Awesome, dude. Well, I like them all. So we'll hit you up next time, and maybe I'll have another answer. All right.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks for coming on. Tony Schwartz, Missoula, Montana.
Thank
Keep
you,
working
Paul.
to restore hemp. Good night.